we're going to talk about today.
Oops, sorry.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is talking a little bit about introducing AAC and talking about a little bit about what it is, talking about what it's not, and talking a little bit about how to use it and the expectations that go along with that. Okay. So I'm a speech therapist over at Roll Point, and I have worked with, again, preschool through 5th grade, and we have all seen what struggling communication can look like. It can be everything from just a learned helplessness where I just don't say anything and let other people do it for you, or to all the way to the extremes of confrontation, tantrums, things getting thrown, major frustrations, and a lot of trying nonverbal communication strategies that sometimes work and sometimes don't. So there's a whole range of what this can look like. And a lot of our students that don't have necessarily the verbal skills, this is where we can come in to start to help them out as speech therapists. And this can be something that they use both at home and in the classroom. Now, with this being said, especially we're thinking about the little ones that are just starting out in preschool, it really is hard for all children to communicate. If we're thinking about our language learners, when they're first starting to learn different words, they're learning new words, and almost all kids are learning new words every day. They're remembering the different vocabulary and different terms that go along with it. If we think back to like our science class, there's a whole bunch of terms that are sort of our tier 2 vocabulary, tier 3 vocabulary that we don't use every day. So we're learning different things. We're also learning how to put longer sentences together. We move quickly in development as far as putting one word together and then building and expanding to phrases, and then eventually to sentences, to longer, more complex sentences and paragraphs, to a full conversation. So it all builds on each other, which goes along with the concepts. There's many different concepts out there that we really want the children to grasp so that they can use it in language. And then they can use it also socially. Once they have a lot of background in that, they can use that hi and bye for greetings, for making requests, for sharing information with each other, and use it all across different settings, from home to out in the community to their school day.
Good. All right, so kind of what kinds of things have you guys done when you have your children with those communication difficulties? Anything in particular that you guys started before you moved to AAC, or any thoughts?
Our house is the most intense game of charades.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, it is high stakes charades all day, every day. My son has an incredibly rare genetic condition, which we've only known about for about 2 years. And so before that, I was told he would grow out of it. He'll learn to talk. It's all in my head, that kind of stuff. So we've been not only fighting that uphill battle, but then also trying to help him. So I feel like we've lost a lot of time. You were talking about pre-K. We've lost a lot of time. We're in 3rd grade now. So we tried PECS, but he lacks the manual dexterity for that. We've done modified, but he's really good at tableting. So that's where we are now.
Wonderful. Anybody else? All right. In our SLP world, we say we introduce AAC. As soon as we start to see that difficulty with communication, we want to make sure that we're providing some way for our students to communicate. So we've been referring to this acronym AAC, and for those of you who hear the word but aren't quite sure where it comes from, it stands for Augmentative or Alternative Communication. And so when we think about augmentative communication, it's going to support or enhance the communication that they already have. That could be a few words, it could be a few signs. It could be a student who has some spoken language, but they're just really hard to understand. And that's a way for them to be able to really express themselves fully. And then we also have alternative communication. And so when that spoken communication is not effective or it's not available, we use a different type of communication. And so that is what AAC stands for. And the big thing that I want to stress is that AAC can be temporary or it can be permanent. But either way, it's crucial to language development. It's that visual language support that allows our children to develop the communication that they need to. So there are different types of AAC, and the first one we talk about is light tech. So Meredith, you referenced that picture exchange, that PEX piece of it. It could be a core communication board. It could be signs like ASL. It could also be eye gaze boards for our students who can rely on their eyes to look and locate pictures with some partner assistance. So these are all things primarily that don't have a voice output component to them. The next area you may see are some of those mid-tech devices, and these do have some voice output to them. However, they're pretty limited either to a short message, which you may see on some of the switches. We do have some GoTalk systems that have levels and a limited number of pictures that are available, but they do have the voice output. And then finally, we have that high-tech AAC. And these are going to be our more robust communication systems. A lot of times they are on an electronic type device. It may be an iPad, which is primarily what we provide here in Hanover County. It could be an eye gaze system for a student who relies on eye gaze. It could be a dedicated communication device. So the only thing that is on that system is the communication program. So for those of you that have children using AAC, would you mind sharing what AAC your students primarily using?
We're using the dedicated one for Josh.
Okay. Okay. Right. So you guys touched on this just a little bit, but what are some concerns that you guys may have about your child using AAC? Or what are some things that you may have heard about AAC that make you wonder if it's the right tool?
So I'll speak up. One of the concerns, I guess, that kind of was just brought up to me is like the high tech, you know, and using a screen. Cobry loves a screen. He loves interactive play with like shapes. With a early development specialist prior to being in preschool, Cobry was, you know, told not to be using those devices because it is a proactive correction, which, you know, hindered his ability to fully understand what's right or wrong or tell him what the wrong answer is automatically. While using a high-tech device, Cobry is fully involved in it, loves to play with it, but when it comes to time to get off of it, it is a ornery temper tantrum that he goes through every time. So that's one of the concerns I have.
Okay.
My biggest one is just getting implemented. It just seems so overwhelming between coordinating at home and school. And we're fortunate we have supportive family and friends, but we're new to the area. So not only are we trying to navigate a new everything, we're also trying to navigate a new communication system. So we personally lack supports around us people, but we have school supports, but so society outside we're lacking social support. So everything just kind of seems overwhelming with that piece right now, which is why it's been sitting in the closet for 2 months, because we just don't know where to begin.
Okay. And what system?
So we have a dedicated iPad with Forge for Life.
Okay. All right.
And we BA.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Laureano. It's nice to have you here. We were just talking about some concerns that you may have about your child using AAC, and anything that you may have heard of that makes you wonder if it's the right tool. Feel free to jump in, ask questions, however you go. All right, anybody else want to jump in? All right.
Okay. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about also is some of the myths that might be sort of out there in the community as far as why we choose to use AAC, and thinking about, as speech therapists, like how it can benefit your child. So one of the myths that we have definitely heard before is that this is the last resort in speech language intervention. That is not true. That is actually one of the first things that we try because it's very beneficial for those early stages. I have started children off as young as 2 using the AAC because, again, it does combine the verbal, and some of the high-tech devices give the visual, but it also can do the voice output as well. And it's a great thing to, again, start early, because if we say that, oh, we'll just wait to see if they're interested, this could take a while. And one of the main things with AAC is that we want to model for the child. And if we really think about how like language is developed, it's done a lot in imitation. And so by us using the device and using it like every day, everywhere they go, it helps a child understand that this is how we communicate. And it can be incorporated into therapy at the earliest times, especially when child's behaviors might be difficult to interpret exactly what they want. That's the perfect time to introduce AAC so they can have a visual representative of what they want to say. Okay. All right. Now, this is another one we have definitely heard before. AAC stops or hinders speech development. I am very happy to say that the research is not true with this. Actually, all the research is truly saying that AAC improves the speech development. And it also reduces that pressure. Sometimes we get so involved, especially like, oh, what is that? What is that? Sometimes we can point to it, and it takes and relieves the pressure that a child might feel in trying to give that verbal output all the time. So it's a great way for a child to communicate, and really it helps with the speech production. More so, I have seen with younger kids, especially those that were not talking at all. Once we start using that AAC, especially in the classroom environment, and using it consistently, kids pick up on those words and they try. I'm seeing a lot of kids try at least some verbal approximations to try to speak and try to communicate as well. And it really allows kids to bypass that initial like motor demand of having to form those sounds. They can point, even if it's a low-tech device, that they can still communicate and not have that motor demand of speech that they have to focus on, and still get their message across, which is huge for them.
Absolutely.
Now, this is a case where we've definitely seen children come in with behaviors that we would not expect in, say, a neurotypical classroom. And one of the things that helps behavior is the use of AAC. So once a child can see that they can communicate, the behaviors truly lessen. Because if you think about it, if a child's behaviors are due to them trying to communicate what they want and they're not getting it, the behaviors escalate. AAC is a way for them to communicate what they want in usually a fairly productive fashion. And it works for so many children to really be able to express themselves for the first time. And so that behaviors, they're alleviated, which is great to see. And sometimes we can definitely understand people can be afraid that this iPad or a high-tech device might be destroyed. That does happen sometimes. We understand that. We're human. We know how kids work. And we know that it's a challenge sometimes for a child that's tantruming or trying to communicate themselves or having a meltdown, that it might not, their behaviors might not be an expression of exactly how they're able to control their bodies. So we work with you as far as the families go to work with the high-tech devices and try to make it as safe and, I guess, child-proof as possible. And we have very durable cases that go through everything. I'll just sort of show mine. This thing has been tossed quite a few times and it's still kicking, so I'm very happy about that. But I mean, if you think about it, behaviors are often that student's most reliable form of communication. When they tantrum, they get some sort of reaction, whether it's positive or negative. So using that AAC and be able to communicate can definitely lessen that.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is that we're, again, thinking about that AAC, we have that range from light tech to high tech. And so there are times, just like we may text a friend, or we may call a friend, or we may write down a message. We have multiple ways of using our language. AAC, we have those multiple ways of using different communication. So all students need to have that access to all the different types.
One other area that we have definitely heard, especially say the younger students, people have to be a certain age to benefit from AAC. Children and adults can benefit from AAC. We use an AAC device from everywhere. Again, I've started again with a 2-year-old. I have heard some people trying it at the infant level, just to sort of a touch screen or a touch picture that still would be considered AAC. A lot of people start out with like baby signs, and that is a form of AAC. And definitely it enables a child to communicate their wants and needs before necessarily the verbal output is available. So even moderate effectiveness of AAC for all ages throughout the school years and beyond. We have many different people that into adulthood still use AAC to either augment their communication or as a completely alternative system. And whole communities are built around that. We have deaf communities, we have AAC communities that are out there, autism communities that also use that. So this is not something that's isolated to in a time frame or an age group. It is across a lifetime, and that's what we're building. We're building functional communication across the lifetime.
And even if you start when you're 8 or 9 or 15, we've pulled in AAC for students that are older that, again, they communicated by hitting those. And so we taught just simply go away on a device, and just that ability to communicate that one thing helped with the behaviors. So it doesn't, again, we talk a lot about those young kids, but anytime at any age of your lifespan, AAC is a perfectly good solution, and one that should be considered first. All right. So one of the other things, when you talk about that motor piece, a lot of people have always thought that you have to be able to physically touch a device to benefit from AAC. And that's just simply not true. We have so many different access methods, whether it's through switches to activate a high-tech device or switches just to execute a single message. We have eye gaze devices. And again, so we do have students that, lack the fine motor to be able to really manipulate some of our light tech systems. And so technology has advanced at such a significant rate that this myth just has kind of gone by the wayside simply because technology has advanced so much. One of the other things that we often hear is that there has to be some sort of progression, but from that low tech to, or that light tech to the high tech. And we know that there are absolutely no prerequisite skills needed to use AAC. A lot of our kiddos we're finding really benefit from that voice output because it's helping them associate the meaning with the symbols that they're saying. I have worked with several students that they will just push all the buttons until they find the right one. And so that overwhelmingness that we see on the devices for students, they're really not so overwhelming for the kiddos because they have this innate nature at this point to explore technology and use that. One of the other things that we have found study-wise, this happens when I try to scroll instead of use my mouse. Students who have those speech generating devices are often given more opportunities to communicate. They're given more ability to have longer messages, are included in more social situations. And they also, of course, increase those developmental outcomes. The other myth that we want to address is that people who can express their basic needs already don't need AAC. And it's just, language is so extensive that just because you can ask for your favorite foods or your favorite TV show doesn't mean you really have the language supports that you need to be communicating with everybody throughout your day. We want to provide those systems so everybody has that ability to communicate all day long. It supplements, we have students that can say 2 and 3 words together, but when they're given that access to the high tech, they're making 4 and 5 word sentences that are complete, they're grammatically intact. It's really just amazing to see when given the right tools what our kiddos can accomplish. And finally, people who have severe communication impairments, there's this perception that they can't learn literacy skills with AAC. And I think this is so frustrating that there is that perception, but it's absolutely not true. There are many ways to teach all of our complex communicators how to read, how to write, how to participate in their academics, just as their peers do. They just have a different output system. So we want to kind of dispel that myth right away because literacy is absolutely a requirement for everybody, and our AAC users should not be excluded from that. All right, do you guys have any questions right now? And I did kind of along these myths wanted to address that whole screen piece of it. I know our kids are so drawn to screens, and one of the things we definitely recommend is that if you have a device user, that their communication, if it's on an iPad, stays their communication, and that there's a separate device that is their fun, that's their play, because we do often see that happen is they love their YouTube on their device, and then the communication just kind of dispels because you can't watch YouTube and talk on your device at the same time. So we do kind of encourage the separate devices, but we do the best that we can. Meredith, did you have a question?
I did. You were talking about the exploring and letting the child just sort of poke around and get to know. When he had his evaluations, that was strongly frowned upon. So I wasn't in touch, and I don't know if that was just for the evaluation, is he going to be able, again, he's got a lot of issues. And it all impacts each other. And I mean, I've not let him, touch it yet. So
Yeah, so when we look at AAC development and their use and their growth of language, it's very similar to what we would expect for typical language development. The process is almost identical. So that babbling, when babies are just kind of playing with their mouth and making all the sounds, that is what we see our AAC users go through that phase. They're pushing all the buttons. They are playing with their voice at that point. They're exploring it, they're figuring it out. So it absolutely is encouraged. I am so sorry that misinformation was going, and I hope it was just purely for the evaluation, but no, the babbling, the pushing their device, I mean, it would be akin to talking to yourself, there's just, kids do that. They talk out loud and they're doing things. So we absolutely encourage them to explore their voices, especially when they're new. We address later in school when they're kind of exploring out of turn that, we address it just like we would any other speaking student of, hey, it's not time to talk right now. So, we have to be quiet, but yeah, babbling, pushing the buttons on their device, figuring it out, that's 100% A-okay.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we want the students to try that out. That's the only way. I mean, if you think about it, it's the only way they're going to learn it is to experiment and to see how things work and how can I express myself. So yeah, totally okay.
It just felt like there were a lot of rules associated into how he's supposed to be using it. And I think that's what's overwhelming me is I don't know what all the rules are and whether we're going to be using it right or wrong, or, how do I express that to him if I don't know what's going on?
Right. Absolutely. It does seem like there are rules, and actually there's not a whole lot that really, like, the biggest thing is keeping the design of the application intact and not just adding words here and there. Like, that to me is like the biggest rule, if you will. But yeah, exploration, you talking on their device with them, to me, it's a foreign language. And it's a foreign language to us. To them, it's going to be possibly their native language. And so we need to do everything that we would to learn a new language. And that includes experimenting with it. And if I say this, what happens? And, so we can definitely help guide you through all of that.
Perfect.
Sure. All right. I think we are doing pretty good on time. So I have a little activity. You could do it in your head, you could write it down, but I want you to look at these 8 words and see, I'm going to give you about 1 minute to see how many words or phrases or sentences that you can come up with just using these words. It's 1 minute. Good. All right, so Ms. Brooks put in the chat that she was able to come up with 10. Anybody else want to share their number of phrases or sentences that they were able to come up with?
I came up with 21.
Okay, good. Good. You want to share an example or two?
Well, I just take each individual one and that's its own all by itself.
Yep. Absolutely. And then you can combine. Anybody else want to share how many they got?
really, I didn't keep count of the ones I was coming up with, but there is so many in ways that you can use each word either together, like I want more cookies, or, you know, I want to have that. Can I have more time?
Oh, so you're using words that aren't on there.
Oh.
I mean, I thought of sentence, you were saying sentences though, right? Correct?
Yeah, but only with those words that are on the
Okay.
screen. So this
Oh,
is
okay.
this is kind of typical of what we may see, some initial communication boards. You know, we've got some snacks, we've got bathroom, finished, more. So it's got some vocabulary on there, and you can absolutely create, you know, I want more juice, I want all done, I want bathroom. So yeah, there are definitely things that you can communicate. But now, looking at my computer, that won't, there we go. Looking at these 8 words, real quick in a minute, kind of jot down or think of some of those, how many phrases or words or sentences that you can come up with. All right. So, any thoughts on numbers of sentences or phrases, or any observations on the differences between the 2 communication boards?
These are far more abstract words and concepts than the concrete ones.
Yes.
I don't particularly want to teach him. I don't want help.
Yes. That is the double-edged sword of AAC for sure. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Anybody else want to volunteer? All right. So these words, these more abstract words, are words that are probably some of the most powerful words in our language. And back to the right screen. They are critical to our AAC systems.
Yes. And this is one of the reasons why we want children to have a robust communication system. And what I mean by that is we want it to be able to express anything a child wants to say. And sometimes that might be hard to hear, especially as parents and as teachers too. But that's something that is really their right to say as a person. They need to be able to express themselves. So for us, how we are defining a robust communication system, they need to have these 4 key elements. They need to allow the user to communicate a really large range of functions of communication. We do this all the time, so we want to make sure that they are able to communicate functionally as well. Number 2, we want them to provide that access to the core vocabulary, and we'll talk about in a little bit more detail exactly what that includes. And same thing for the fringe vocabulary. That's going to be personal to them, but we wanted to make sure that that's something they have as well. We'll define exactly what that is in just a second. And then also provide access to the alphabet, because that goes into the reading piece as well and very necessary for their involvement in the classroom. So the first piece of, again, having that robust communication system is having a device that allows a child to express themselves with a range of communication functions. Probably this morning, I know for me, I know I gave directions. I know I heard some complaints and protests for my kids getting up out of bed this morning, and they definitely requested some assistance. And I had to ask some questions. They asked questions and got answers about today too. And also said bye and hi and a good I love you. We want your user to use that as well. We want them to have every single function that a typical communicator would have too. And so that is so important that an AAC system has the capabilities to do that for you. It's wonderful that your child is starting out and can say what they want, but there's so much more to life than just saying what you want. We've got to get their opinions out there too, and making them more of the community and more of the classroom. And so having that range of communication functions is huge. If we're not seeing the ability to have that range of communication systems, we really would want to reevaluate exactly the system itself and make sure that it's the right fit for the child and what, again, moving forward would be appropriate for them. And one other thing, just to sort of raise that, as far as do not want help, that is okay. And in fact, for older children, again, age appropriate, we can definitely include some curse words. I know that's sometimes hard to hear, especially from parents. We don't want them to say some choice words to us, but at the same time, if you had like a teenager, you might have some curse words getting thrown around. So that is vitally important to put age appropriate material that is on there too, so that they can communicate just as everybody else.
Yes. And to kind of tack onto that, I always have to run through my head as, people are saying, oh, but I don't want this word on there. Can we take this word off? Or do we have to have this in here? And I always think, well, can I take it out of a speaking communicator's brain or mouth? And if the answer is no, then I cannot take it out of our AAC users, speakers, communication system. And again, like Melinda said, as much as we don't want to hear our kids say, I don't want help, or no, or other choice phrases, we have to respect them as communicators. And that means giving them the words that will allow them to be just like their verbal speaking counterparts. All right, Melinda.
Go for it. And also, some of those words that you saw earlier were some core vocabulary. So what core is, and why we talk about it so much in AAC, is that this is really a simple set of words that in any language, they're used frequently and across contexts. So what this means is that we have about 350 words that really, if we look at our communication, we say most often. These are 80% of the words we speak regularly, like I'm going to go to the store. I'll see you later. These are the words that we're going to use on a daily basis, if not hourly even. Now these would include sight words. So this is also benefits children if they're reading the words on, say, core communication boards, picture exchange, as well as even some high-tech devices. This helps their reading, because these are also a lot of words that are found on the Deutsch word list. Sorry, I have a problem with that one. Now, there are also words that are involved in the personal core as well that can be used by specific children. They might not be core words for others. And I have a child that a Tyrannosaurus Rex is definitely in one of their personal core words, because it's something that they use and talk about every single day. So what could some of your personal core words be? I think AAC might be one of my personal core.
Chocolate would be one of mine.
Chocolate is good too. Okay, so think of anything else that might be a personal core.
Thomas the Tank Engine around here.
There we go.
Or Mickey
Definitely.
Mouse.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse, absolutely. I've also had a student let leaf blower was one of his very big personal core.
Yes,
And that-
Bluey, yes.
Oh, Bluey, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
100%.
Yes. And that's the thing. These are the core words that really help a child communicate for a variety of purposes. So they might talk about how much they love Bluey. Oh, Bluey went to the store. Bluey is coming home. Oh, Bluey's going to sleep. So that can be combined with so many different words in the core that they can make huge amount of sentences just with those words.
All right, so the fringe vocabulary. Fringe vocabulary is a set of words, and it's mostly nouns that are very situation or context specific. Some examples of these words would be strawberry, cookie, pretzel, those words that we saw in that first little activity. They could also be words like hydrogen or respiration, Pluto, Paris. These do include those personalized words like names of friends and family members, and they're words that we kind of consider they fit into certain categories. They could be vehicles, they could be animals, colors. But amazingly enough, only 20% of what we say, of all the hundreds of thousands of words that are in our language, only 20% actually come from those fringe words. So, the importance of those words change from person to person. They give the speaker the ability to communicate about very specific topics in very specific environments. But we have to have that vocabulary as part of that robust vocabulary system. A lot of times when you think of our low-tech picture exchange type communication, you're seeing more fringe vocabulary and less of the core vocabulary. So we want to make sure that our AAC systems follow that same rule that we have of 80% of our language, spoken language, is that core vocabulary, and only 20% is that fringe. So we want to make sure, as we're looking at that robust system, that it kind of meets that 80-20 requirement. And then that final piece we talked about is that alphabet access. So we want to make sure that our AAC devices have access to a keyboard that's within the system. So they can be able to play with the alphabet just as our kids may scribble on a piece of paper as they're learning to write and just explore written language. That keyboard is going to be our their access to the written language that they have. And again, you're going to see kids press the letters and press random combinations of that, but that again is very normal. It's very expected, so they can learn the names of the letters and what the letters look like and are shaped like. All right, so we kind of talked a little bit about those words being abstract for some of the core words. They're not always what we would think of in a communication system, but they are so very important. The thing about those core vocabulary, they're going to use those words, their entire life. Fringe vocabulary outside of like our specific family and favorite foods and things like that, when you start looking at those words that you might hear in school, those academic type words, we don't necessarily see those words day in and day out. So we may see the word Pluto during that 2-week span that we're learning about space, but then we may not hear or need the word Pluto for another 3 years until they're in a different class. We see a lot of families getting caught up in that trap of, but we don't have that word in our device. And that's okay to not have that word in there. What we want to do is be able to provide our kids a way to communicate about everything in their environment using the words that they have. So we don't need necessarily a name for something, but we need to learn as a community to ask things in a slightly different way. Let's see. So we want to really encourage that generative language, which really is the goal of all AAC, for our kids to be able to say what they want, when they want, wherever they want. I think I kind of lumped all of those things into one, but the biggest thing is not to get so hyper focused on having every critical noun available in a system. It's making sure that we know how to teach our kids how to ask, or how to kind of come around not having the word in there. So I'm kind of stumbling over my words at this point, but one of my favorite examples is, rather than asking a student, what's the word for air coming in and out of our lungs, and expecting them to possibly have the word respiration in their vocabulary list, we could change that question around and say, tell me about respiration. And they could very easily in their core words say, well, it goes in and out. And, that it kind of is that assumption for air. We could teach them to type the word air since it's not in their device. And again, that kind of builds those literacy skills. Air goes in and out. I mean, that's respiration broken down very simply into that core vocabulary that we use. And we'll touch more on some of that piece in some of our further seminars. All right, before we kind of end things, we've got probably about 7 minutes to go. AAC is such a process. It's a tool. As soon as you guys have all probably figured out, is just because you have that device in your hands doesn't mean it's going to automatically make your child a communicator. It's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of patience on everybody's part, and a lot of determination on everybody's part. Progress is slow and steady, but that's okay. We have to really have that good, strong foundation in order to really build their language. What questions specifically do you guys have for us? Got a few minutes, and I'm also happy and available if it goes past that 11:30 time. If there are specific questions that you want to ask, we're more than happy to stay and answer them as well.
I also have put a link in the chat to a Google form with an evaluation about today. And you can also ask questions through that form as well. Mm-hmm. And yes, we are going to post a recording for this. I will keep you posted as to where that will be.
I guess specifically for us, is there anything that we need to do to get started with him using it in school, or do our device company has offered to do a training? Do we start that training and then with the teachers about how to use it, even though they are somewhat familiar, and then we just bring it into the school? Like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, so that certainly, Melinda and I can even sit down with your family individually and, kind of work through the system yourselves. Our SLPs at the schools also have that same access to be able to help if they have, for us to provide that help as well, if they have questions. We want our kids communicating at home and at school. So if there is a system, I would go ahead and, talk to the school SLP and let them know that he has it, that you're ready to send it to school. And, I think it would be great to meet as a team, you and the school SLP. And if Melinda and I need us to join in, we're happy to kind of help start that whole process for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And Melinda
So
put our,
Cobre
sorry, go ahead.
No, go. So Cobre had just started at Roll Point at the beginning of this year. So are these things like you would start developing what AAC devices he would be using and relay that to us? And is that something that you possibly would provide, or we would have to create our own board if we're going with like the base model?
Well, a lot of the users at Roll Point, we're starting to see as they're making progress with this, that they are getting some of their own devices. And we're seeing as far as the kids are developing, as long as they're showing interest, and they're able to also have the dexterity to activate the buttons, we are using that AAC as well. And we're starting with, there's a device, excuse me, there is an AAC format that we use with our ProLoquo devices that they've seen in the classroom, because that's what we use as far as the icons go. And we have tried out many devices or ProLoquo in the classroom to see if they are able to access it.
And we do have a process in the county if the school SLPs feel that moving to that high-tech AAC is the student is ready for that. They request a trial for that particular student. And so then we will issue an iPad with the communication app on it for the student to trial. Typically, we use that trial at school for a few weeks and then pull the parents and family in so we can start sending it home and having that communication there. So there will be that parent involvement and piece in there. So we don't demand or we don't request at this point that families go out and purchase their own AAC. We are capable of providing those for the family. I know we send home low-tech boards and things like that as well to support all the communication.
Thank you.
And Melinda did put our email addresses in the chat. So please feel free if you are thinking through this and have other questions to email us. If you'd like to set up a time just to look through what your child is currently using and how to, specifically use it for different things, we're also available to have those parent meetings. We want to be able to really build your confidence in using the communication tools with your students, regardless of what those tools are.
And next month, Melinda and Lauren will be presenting in person at the Atlee Community Library, and they will have some devices there available for people to take a look at as well.
And it'll be the same information that we've presented today, but if you want to come and get another double dose, you're more than welcome to. And again, and then in the next several series, we'll be talking a lot more about how to model on the device, how to use it at home, how to use it in the community. So it'll be kind of some more specific, in-depth getting to use the device. All right, if nobody else has any questions, I think we are finished. Again, we're available here to answer any more or send us an email, and we hope to see you at some of our other presentations.